Jasmine Johnson adjusted her nurse's badge as she stepped into the break room of St. Mary's Medical Center in Chicago. After working a grueling 12-hour shift in the emergency department, her body was exhausted. There was only one thing she looked forward to after every shift: calling her mom. Despite everything, Jasmine never missed a day without checking on her. She smiled as she dialed the familiar number. 3 rings later, the call connected. "Hello?" her mother answered. "Hi, Mom," Jasmine said warmly. "How are you doing?" Linda Johnson sighed. "I'm fine. Is something wrong?" "No," Jasmine laughed softly. "I just wanted to hear your voice. I miss you." "I'm in the middle of something." "I know. I won't keep you long. I just wanted to make sure you're okay." "I'm fine." Another awkward silence followed. "Okay. I love you, Mom." Hum. Jasmine waited for the call to disconnect. It didn't. Her mother had accidentally left the phone connected. At first, Jasmine smiled. Then she heard another woman's voice. "Was that Jasmine calling again?" Linda laughed. "Yeah, it's her." Another woman chuckled. "She's always checking on you." Linda's tone suddenly changed. "She acts like she's the perfect daughter." Jasmine frowned. She hadn't meant to listen. She reached for the end call button. Then she heard the next sentence. "Honestly, I can't stand how needy she is." Jasmine froze. The phone nearly slipped from her hand. The other woman sounded surprised. "But doesn't she help you with your bills?" Linda laughed. "She does. She pays my rent sometimes. She buys my groceries. She even paid for my car repairs last year." "So what's the problem?" Linda answered without hesitation. "She's just a burden. She's always calling. Always trying to make me feel guilty. I swear, if she stopped sending money tomorrow, I'd find someone else to help me." The room went completely silent. Jasmine couldn't breathe. 28 years. 28 years of trying to be the daughter her mother wanted. Working overtime. Skipping vacations. Putting her own dreams on hold. Sending thousands of dollars whenever her mother asked. And this. This was how she was spoken about when she wasn't around. The other woman asked quietly. "Have you ever told her you appreciate everything she does?" Linda scoffed. "Why would I? If I thank her, she'll think she's special." The words shattered something inside Jasmine. A tear rolled down her cheek. Then another. She slowly sat down in one of the empty chairs in the break room, staring at the floor as the conversation continued. "I don't know why she's so emotional," Linda said. "She cries over everything. I've never understood her." Jasmine finally found the strength to whisper. "Mom." The conversation stopped. There was complete silence. Linda realized the call had never ended. "Jasmine?" Her voice sounded nervous now. Jasmine closed her eyes. "I heard everything." Neither of them spoke. Finally, Jasmine said quietly. "I spent my whole life trying to make you proud of me." Her voice trembled. "I thought if I worked harder, gave you more, loved you more, maybe one day you'd love me the same way." More silence. Then Jasmine whispered the hardest words she'd ever spoken. "I'm done trying." She ended the call. She sat there for nearly an hour. Not crying. Not moving. Just trying to understand how the person she loved most in the world could think so little of her. Memories flooded her mind. At 16, she worked weekends at a grocery store to help pay household bills. At 22, she graduated from nursing school with honors while juggling 2 part-time jobs. At 24, she emptied her savings account to keep her mother's apartment from being foreclosed. Whenever Linda needed money, Jasmine found a way. Whenever Linda called, Jasmine answered. Whenever Linda criticized her, Jasmine blamed herself. But now, everything finally made sense. She wasn't unloved because she hadn't done enough. She was exhausted because she'd spent years trying to earn a love that was never conditional in the first place. That night, Jasmine opened her banking app. One by one, she canceled every automatic payment she had been sending to her mother. Then she sent a single text message. "Mom, I love you, and I always will. But I can no longer sacrifice my peace to earn your approval. I truly hope you find happiness, but from today forward, I have to start living my own life." She pressed send. Then she placed her phone face down on the table. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt like freedom. The days that followed were some of the hardest Jasmine had ever faced. Every morning, she woke up expecting to see a missed call or a text from her mother explaining that it had all been a misunderstanding. Nothing came. Instead, Linda sent one short message 3 days later. Are you really going to stop helping me over one conversation? Jasmine stared at the screen for several minutes before locking her phone without replying. For years, she would have apologized, even when she had done nothing wrong. Not this time. A week later, Jasmine met her best friend, Emily Parker, for lunch at a small cafe near Millennium Park. The moment Emily saw her, she knew something was wrong. You've been crying, Emily said gently. Jasmine forced a smile. I'm trying not to anymore. Over coffee, Jasmine told her everything. The phone call. The insults. The years of sacrificing her own happiness. Emily reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Jasmine, do you know what breaks my heart the most? What? You still keep making excuses for someone who has never apologized. Jasmine lowered her eyes. I keep wondering if maybe I wasn't a good enough daughter. Emily shook her head. No. You were a daughter trying to earn a love that should have been given freely. Those words stayed with Jasmine long after lunch ended. The following Monday, she attended her first therapy session. She almost canceled 3 times before walking into the office. Dr. Rebecca Collins greeted her with a warm smile. What brings you here today? Jasmine tried to answer. Instead, tears poured down her face. I'm tired, she whispered. So tired. For the next hour, she talked about her childhood. How she worked after school to help pay bills. How every paycheck disappeared into someone else's problems. How every accomplishment was met with criticism instead of congratulations. When the session ended, Dr. Collins handed her a small notebook. I want you to write down one thing every day that you're proud of about yourself. Jasmine frowned. That sounds easy. It isn't, Dr. Collins replied. Not for someone who spent her whole life believing she's never enough. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, Jasmine began rebuilding her life. Instead of sending money to her mother, she paid off her student loans. She opened a savings account. She bought herself a reliable SUV instead of driving the old car that constantly broke down. For the first time, she decorated an apartment exactly the way she wanted. Soft gray furniture. Fresh flowers on the dining table. Family photos. Except there was only one missing. Her mother's. One afternoon at the hospital, Jasmine cared for an elderly patient named Eleanor Brooks. Mrs. Brooks had no family nearby. After being discharged, she smiled warmly at Jasmine. You remind me of my daughter. Jasmine smiled politely. I hope that's a good thing. Oh, it is. Mrs. Brooks reached into her purse and handed Jasmine a handwritten note. When people spend their lives taking care of everyone else, they forget they deserve to be cared for too. Jasmine read the sentence twice. Then she folded the note carefully and placed it inside her wallet. She would carry it everywhere. 6 months after the phone call, Jasmine noticed something remarkable. She laughed more. She slept better. The constant knot in her chest had disappeared. For the first time in years. She wasn't surviving. She was living. Then, one rainy Saturday morning, there was a knock at her apartment door. She wasn't expecting anyone. Curious, she looked through the peephole. Her heart nearly stopped. Standing outside was her mother, Linda Johnson. She looked nothing like the confident woman Jasmine remembered. Her designer purse was gone. Her clothes were worn. Her shoulders were slumped with exhaustion. Jasmine stood frozen. After taking a deep breath, she slowly unlocked the door. Neither of them knew that the conversation about to take place would change their relationship forever. Jasmine stood at the door, her hands still resting on the doorknob. For a long moment, neither she nor her mother spoke. Finally, Linda forced a smile. Aren't you going to invite me in? Jasmine took a slow breath. I'll invite you in, but I need us to have a respectful conversation. Linda looked surprised by her daughter's calm confidence. Of course. Jasmine stepped aside. Linda walked into the apartment and looked around. The place was warm and beautifully decorated. A bookshelf filled one corner of the living room. Fresh white lilies sat on the dining table, and sunlight poured through the large windows. This is nice, Linda admitted. Thank you. Jasmine offered her a seat and brought out 2 cups of coffee. The silence between them was almost unbearable. Finally, Linda cleared her throat. I've been having a hard time. Jasmine listened without interrupting. I lost my job 4 months ago. She looked down at her hands. My savings are gone. The landlord says I have 30 days to move out if I don't catch up on my rent. Jasmine nodded sympathetically. I'm sorry to hear that. Linda looked up hopefully. So, I need your help. Jasmine already knew what was coming. What kind of help? Linda hesitated. I need $10,000. The number hung in the air. Months earlier, Jasmine wouldn't have hesitated. She would have emptied her savings account without asking a single question. But therapy had changed her. She had changed. I'm sorry, Jasmine said gently. I can't do that. Linda blinked. What do you mean you can't? I mean, I'm not giving you money. Linda's expression hardened. After everything I've done for you? Jasmine looked at her quietly. Everything you did for me? Linda crossed her arms. I raised you. You had a roof over your head. You had food to eat. Jasmine nodded. And I'm grateful for that. But I also worked after school to help pay the bills. I paid the mortgage when you couldn't. I bought groceries. I paid for your prescriptions. I covered your car repairs. I did those things because I loved you. She paused before continuing. But love shouldn't feel like a debt that never gets paid. Linda's eyes narrowed. So you're just going to let your own mother become homeless? Jasmine felt a familiar wave of guilt wash over her. For years, that guilt controlled every decision she made. Not anymore. I'll help you find resources. I'll help you create a budget. I'll even help you look for a new job. But I won't keep solving problems with money. Linda slammed her coffee cup onto the table. So you've become selfish. Jasmine remained calm. No. I've learned the difference between helping and being used. The words hit Linda like a slap. She stood up angrily. I knew therapy would turn you against your family. Jasmine slowly stood as well. No, Mom. It didn't turn me against my family. It taught me not to abandon myself. Linda opened her mouth to argue but couldn't find the words. Instead, she looked around the apartment again. Everything Jasmine owned had been earned through years of hard work. For the first time, Linda noticed the confidence in her daughter's eyes. This wasn't the little girl who constantly apologized anymore. This was a woman. A woman who had finally learned her worth. As Linda walked toward the front door, she suddenly stopped. Without turning around, she asked quietly. Did you really hear everything that day? Jasmine swallowed hard. Every word. Linda closed her eyes. Tears slowly rolled down her cheeks. I've wanted to apologize so many times. Then why didn't you? Linda's voice broke. Because I was ashamed. She turned around. I was jealous of you. Jasmine stared at her in disbelief. You became everything I wanted to be. You built a career. You bought your own home. You made people respect you. And every time I looked at you, I was reminded of the dreams I never chased. Jasmine had expected excuses. She had expected blame. She never expected honesty. Linda wiped away her tears. I'm sorry, Jasmine. I was wrong. I hurt the one person who loved me the most. Jasmine's own eyes filled with tears. She wanted to forgive her immediately. She wanted to hug her. But healing wasn't that simple. I appreciate your apology, Jasmine said softly. But trust isn't rebuilt in one conversation. Linda nodded. I understand. As she reached the door, she turned back one last time. I hope one day you'll give me the chance to earn your trust. Jasmine smiled sadly. I hope so too. Linda quietly left. Jasmine closed the door and leaned against it. She wasn't crying because she hated her mother. She was crying because, for the first time in her life, her mother had finally told her the truth. But neither of them knew that an even bigger truth was about to come to light. Just 3 days later, Jasmine would receive a phone call from a woman she had never met, one that would completely change everything she believed about her late father. 3 days after Linda left Jasmine's apartment, Jasmine was finishing an evening shift at the hospital when her phone rang. The number wasn't saved in her contacts. She almost ignored it. But something made her answer. Hello? There was silence for a moment. Then an older woman's voice came through. Is this Jasmine Johnson? Yes. Who's calling? My name is Margaret Carter. Jasmine waited. The woman sounded nervous. You don't know me, Jasmine, but I knew your father. Jasmine stopped walking. My father? Her father, Daniel Johnson, had been a mystery for most of her life. Growing up, whenever Jasmine asked about him, Linda always gave the same answer. He left us when you were little. Eventually, Jasmine stopped asking. She had spent years believing her father had chosen another life over her. What do you mean you knew him? Jasmine asked. Margaret hesitated. I think we should talk in person. The following afternoon, Jasmine entered a quiet coffee shop in downtown Chicago. A woman in her late 60s sat near the window, clutching a brown envelope. Jasmine? Margaret? The woman stood. When she looked at Jasmine's face, her eyes immediately filled with tears. Oh my goodness. What? Margaret smiled sadly. You have Daniel's eyes. Jasmine's heart tightened. They sat down. Margaret placed the envelope on the table. I was one of your father's closest friends, she explained. We worked together for years. Jasmine stared at her. My mother said he abandoned us. Margaret's expression changed. That's why I called you. She slowly pushed the envelope across the table. Your father didn't abandon you. Jasmine felt as though the entire room had gone silent. What did you say? He didn't leave because he stopped loving you. Then why did he leave? Margaret lowered her eyes. He was sick. Jasmine frowned. Sick? Cancer. The word hit Jasmine like a punch. Margaret continued. You were 5 years old when Daniel was diagnosed. Jasmine shook her head. No. My mom would have told me. Margaret looked at her with sadness. There's a lot Linda never told you. Jasmine's hands began trembling. Margaret opened the envelope and pulled out several photographs. The first showed a younger Daniel holding a little girl on his shoulders. Jasmine recognized herself immediately. Another showed Daniel kneeling beside her birthday cake while she blew out 5 candles. In every photograph, he was smiling at her. Not the smile of a man who couldn't wait to leave. The smile of a father who adored his daughter. Where did you get these? Your father gave them to me. Jasmine looked up. Why? Margaret took a deep breath. Because before he died, he asked me to make sure you learned the truth someday. Jasmine's eyes widened. Died? Her voice barely escaped her lips. My father is dead? Margaret nodded slowly. He passed away 22 years ago. Jasmine covered her mouth. All these years, she had imagined him somewhere else. Maybe remarried. Maybe raising another family. Maybe simply forgetting she existed. But he had been gone almost her entire life. Why didn't anyone tell me? Margaret reached across the table. There's more. She removed a bundle of envelopes tied together with a faded blue ribbon. Jasmine stared at them. Each envelope had her name written across the front. Jasmine. One said. For Jasmine's 10th birthday. Another. For Jasmine's 16th birthday. Another. For Jasmine's high school graduation. Another. For Jasmine's college graduation. And the final envelope read. For my daughter's wedding day. Jasmine couldn't breathe. What are these? Letters from your father. Tears immediately filled Jasmine's eyes. He knew he wouldn't be there for those moments, Margaret said. So he wrote letters for the future. Jasmine picked up the graduation letter. Her fingers trembled. He wrote these for me? Every single one. Then why didn't I get them? Margaret looked away. Because your mother wouldn't take them. Jasmine froze. What? Daniel asked Linda to give them to you as you grew older. But after he died, she returned everything. She said she wanted to forget him. Jasmine pushed back from the table. No. She shook her head repeatedly. That doesn't make sense. Margaret reached into her bag. Maybe this will. She placed another envelope on the table. Unlike the others, this one wasn't addressed to Jasmine. It was addressed to Linda. This was the last letter Daniel wrote your mother. Jasmine stared at it. Margaret continued. Your father wasn't perfect. Neither was your mother. Their marriage had problems long before his diagnosis. But Daniel never stopped loving you. Not once. Jasmine looked down at the photographs. One showed her sleeping against her father's chest. Suddenly, something returned to her. Not a full memory. Just a feeling. Strong arms carrying her. A man's voice saying, "Daddy loves you, princess." Jasmine broke down. For years, she had carried the pain of believing her father had rejected her. Now she was discovering that the story she'd built her life around wasn't true. That evening, Jasmine sat alone in her apartment with the letters spread across her dining table. She picked up the one marked for Jasmine's 16th birthday. She carefully opened it. The handwriting was slightly shaky. "My beautiful Jasmine. If you're reading this, you're 16 now. I wish I could see the young woman you've become. There may be days when you wonder if you're good enough. Please don't waste your life asking that question. You were enough the moment I first held you. Never spend your life begging someone to recognize your worth. The people who truly love you won't make you earn their love." Jasmine stopped reading. Those words. They were almost exactly what she'd spent months learning in therapy. She pressed the letter against her chest and cried. "Dad." For the first time in more than 20 years, she allowed herself to say the word. Dad. The next morning, Jasmine drove to her mother's apartment. Linda opened the door and immediately knew something was wrong. "Jasmine?" Jasmine held up the bundle of letters. The color drained from Linda's face. "Where did you get those?" "Margaret Carter." Linda stepped backward. "Jasmine. Tell me the truth." Linda looked away. "Please. Did Dad abandon me?" Linda said nothing. "Mom." "No." The answer came out louder than Linda intended. Jasmine stared at her. Linda's eyes filled with tears. "No," she whispered. "He didn't abandon you." Jasmine felt anger rise inside her. "Then why did you tell me he did?" Linda sat down. For several seconds, she couldn't speak. "When your father got sick, everything changed. He couldn't work like before. The medical bills kept coming. I was terrified. And I was angry." "Angry at him?" Linda nodded. "Angry at him. Angry at life. Angry that I was going to be left alone with a little girl and bills I couldn't pay." She wiped her tears. "When he died, I couldn't separate my grief from my anger. So you punished me?" Linda looked at her daughter. "I convinced myself you were too young to understand. But the years passed. And the longer I waited, the harder it became to admit what I'd done." Jasmine's voice trembled. "You let me believe my father didn't want me." "I know. For 22 years. I know." Linda broke down. "I was wrong. I was so wrong." Jasmine shook her head. "You didn't just hide his death. You took away every birthday letter. Every message. Every piece of him he tried to leave me." Linda covered her face. "I'm sorry." Jasmine stood there, tears running down her cheeks. She wanted to scream. But instead, she asked one question. "Where is he buried?" Linda slowly looked up. 2 days later, Jasmine stood in front of a grave at Oakwood Cemetery in Chicago. The headstone read, "Daniel Michael Johnson. Beloved father." Jasmine knelt and placed fresh flowers beside it. For several minutes, she couldn't speak. Finally, she touched the cold stone. "Hi, Dad." Her voice cracked. "I'm sorry I'm late." She laughed through her tears. 22 years late. The wind moved gently through the trees. Jasmine took the photograph of herself sitting on Daniel's shoulders and placed it beside the flowers. "I thought you left me." She wiped her tears. "But you didn't. You loved me." Jasmine closed her eyes. And for the first time, the little girl inside her who had spent years wondering why her father didn't want her finally had an answer. He had wanted her. He had loved her. He simply hadn't been given enough time. But as Jasmine stood to leave, her phone rang. It was Margaret. "Jasmine, there's something else." Jasmine's heart sank. "What?" "Your father left something for you." "What do you mean?" Margaret hesitated. "It's been waiting for you for more than 20 years. And Jasmine. This isn't another letter." Jasmine gripped the phone. "Then what is it?" Margaret's next words left her speechless. It's an inheritance. Jasmine stood beside her father's grave, gripping her phone. For several seconds, she couldn't speak. An inheritance, she finally whispered. Yes, Margaret replied. But Jasmine, there's more to it than money. Jasmine looked down at Daniel Johnson's headstone. What did he leave me? I'd rather explain everything in person. When? Tomorrow morning. There's an attorney you need to meet. Jasmine's stomach tightened. An attorney? His name is Richard Bennett. His firm handled your father's estate. Jasmine frowned. My father died 22 years ago. Why would an attorney still be waiting for me? Margaret went silent. Then she said something Jasmine wasn't prepared for. Because Daniel made sure no one could touch what belonged to you. The next morning, Jasmine arrived at a law office in downtown Chicago. She barely slept the night before. Her mind had been racing. What could her father possibly have left behind? Money? A house? Maybe something sentimental? Margaret was already waiting in the lobby. You okay? She asked. Not really. Margaret smiled gently. You don't have to be. A receptionist led them into a conference room. Behind the large wooden table sat a gray-haired man in a navy suit. He stood as Jasmine entered. Ms. Johnson. I'm Richard Bennett. They shook hands. Richard opened a thick folder. I worked with your father's attorney during the final months of Daniel's life. After the original attorney retired, our firm continued administering the trust. Jasmine sat across from him. Trust? Richard nodded. Your father established one for you. Jasmine looked at Margaret. Then back at Richard. But my mother always told me Dad had nothing when he died. Richard's expression became serious. That wasn't entirely true. He removed several documents. Before Daniel became ill, he and a business partner purchased a small commercial property on Chicago's South Side. Jasmine leaned forward. A building? Yes. At the time, it wasn't worth much. Your father's share was placed into the trust along with a life insurance payment and some investments. Jasmine swallowed. How much are we talking about? Richard paused. Today, the combined value of the assets in the trust is approximately $1.8 million. Jasmine stared at him. She was certain she'd heard him incorrectly. I'm sorry. How much? Approximately $1.8 million. Her mouth fell open. Margaret watched quietly as Jasmine leaned back in her chair. No. She shook her head. There has to be some mistake. There isn't. Richard turned the paperwork toward her. Your father couldn't know exactly what the assets would become worth. But he structured the trust so the principal couldn't be transferred to anyone else while you were a minor. Why didn't I receive it when I turned 18? Because Daniel chose 30 as the age for full control. Jasmine's heart skipped. She had turned 30 only weeks earlier. Richard continued. He believed that by 30, you would be old enough to make decisions without anyone controlling you. The word struck Jasmine deeply. Even while dying. Her father had been thinking about the woman she would someday become. Richard reached into the folder. And he left instructions that you receive this first. He placed a small envelope on the table. Written across the front were 4 words. For my grown-up girl. Jasmine covered her mouth. Dad. She carefully opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. My beautiful Jasmine. If you're reading this, then you made it to 30. I wish I could see you. I wish I could hear your laugh and know what kind of woman you've become. Whatever is waiting for you in this trust is not the greatest thing I'm leaving you. Money disappears. Buildings change. Life changes. What I hope you keep forever is the knowledge that you were deeply loved. Use what I left you to build a life that belongs to you. And if you're fortunate enough to have more than you need, help someone else build theirs. Love, Dad. Jasmine couldn't finish without crying. Richard quietly pushed a box of tissues toward her. For years, she'd worked overtime to pay everyone else's bills. She had skipped vacations. Delayed dreams. Counted every dollar. And all along, her father had left something behind to give her a future. But strangely, the money wasn't what overwhelmed her. It was knowing he had planned for her to have a future even though he knew he wouldn't be there to see it. Jasmine didn't tell Linda. Not immediately. Instead, she went home and placed the documents in her desk. She wasn't going to make emotional decisions. Over the next several weeks, Jasmine met with the attorney and independent financial professionals to understand what she had inherited. She didn't quit her nursing job. She didn't buy a mansion. She didn't suddenly start living extravagantly. For once, Jasmine asked herself a simple question. What do I want my life to mean? The answer came sooner than she expected. 2 months later, Jasmine was walking through the hospital when she saw a teenage girl sitting alone outside a patient's room. The girl looked exhausted. Jasmine recognized that look. It was the same exhaustion she had carried as a teenager. "Hey," Jasmine said gently. "Are you okay?" The girl nodded quickly. "I'm fine." Jasmine sat beside her. "You don't look fine." After a long silence, the girl spoke. "My mom's sick." "I'm sorry." "I'm 17. I work after school, but we're behind on rent." Jasmine's heart sank. "I might have to quit school." Those words transported Jasmine back 14 years. Working after class. Handing over her paycheck. Worrying about bills no teenager should have been responsible for. "What's your name?" "Kayla." Jasmine smiled. "Kayla, don't quit school yet." The girl looked at her. "Why?" "Because there may be another way." That conversation gave Jasmine an idea. Months later, Jasmine established the Daniel Johnson Foundation, a charitable program created in her father's memory to help young people whose education was at risk because of family financial hardship. The first student the program helped was Kayla. When Jasmine handed her the scholarship letter, Kayla burst into tears. "Why are you doing this for me?" Jasmine thought about her father's final letter. Then she smiled. "Because somebody I loved taught me that when you have enough to change someone's life, you don't look away." Almost a year had passed since the accidental phone call that changed everything. Then, one Sunday afternoon, Jasmine received another call. It was Linda. Jasmine stared at the screen before answering. "Hello?" "Hi, sweetheart." There was something different about Linda's voice. She sounded tired. But peaceful. "How are you, Mom?" "I'm okay." A short silence followed. Then Linda said, "I heard about the foundation." Jasmine's expression changed. "Who told you?" "Emily mentioned it." Linda hesitated. "Daniel would have been proud of you." Jasmine closed her eyes. "Thank you." Then Linda said something unexpected. "I'm proud of you too." Jasmine's eyes filled with tears. Those were words she'd wanted to hear her entire life. But something had changed. She no longer needed them to believe in herself. Still, hearing them mattered. "Thank you, Mom." Linda took a breath. "Can I see you?" Jasmine hesitated. "Why?" "There's something I need to give you." "What?" "Something that belonged to your father." Jasmine's heart began racing. "I thought Margaret gave me everything." "No." Linda's voice trembled. "I kept one thing." "What did you keep?" Silence. Then Linda whispered. "A video." Jasmine stood up. "A video of Dad?" "Yes." "Why didn't you tell me?" "I couldn't watch it." "Not after he died." Jasmine gripped the phone tighter. "What's on it?" Linda started crying. The last message her father ever recorded. That evening, Jasmine arrived at Linda's apartment. Her mother was waiting at the dining table. Between them sat an old storage box. Linda opened it and removed a small digital recording device that had been preserved with Daniel's belongings. "He recorded it at the hospital," Linda said. 2 days before he died." Jasmine's hands trembled. Linda placed the device in front of her. "I think it's time." Jasmine pressed play. The screen flickered. Then, her father appeared. He looked weak. Much thinner than in the photographs. But when he smiled, Jasmine immediately recognized it. Her smile. "Hey, princess." Jasmine covered her mouth as tears filled her eyes. Daniel looked directly into the camera. "If you're watching this, then I'm probably not there anymore." He paused. "But there's something I need you to know." His voice weakened. "Whatever anyone tells you about me, never believe that I chose to leave you." Jasmine began sobbing. Daniel smiled. "You were the best thing that ever happened to me." "And Jasmine." His eyes filled with tears. "Don't spend your life trying to convince people to love you. Love isn't supposed to feel like an audition." Jasmine reached toward the screen. Her father took a breath. "Live. Travel. Fall in love. Make mistakes. Laugh too loudly. And when life hurts, don't let pain convince you to stop being kind." Then he smiled one final time. "I love you, princess. Always." The video ended. Jasmine sat completely still. Linda was crying across from her. After several moments, Jasmine reached across the table. For the first time in almost a year, she took her mother's hand. It wasn't complete forgiveness. It didn't erase 22 years of lies. But it was a beginning. And sometimes, a beginning is enough. 3 years later. Morning sunlight poured through the windows of Jasmine Johnson's home in Chicago. The house wasn't enormous. It wasn't filled with expensive furniture or luxury decorations. But it was filled with something Jasmine had wanted her entire life. Peace. She stood in the kitchen pouring coffee when she heard tiny footsteps racing down the hallway. Mommy. Jasmine turned just in time for a little girl to wrap both arms around her legs. Good morning, sleepyhead. 5-year-old Olivia looked up at her. Is Grandma coming today? Jasmine smiled. She said she'd be here before lunch. Olivia cheered and ran toward the living room. Jasmine watched her daughter disappear around the corner and smiled. Sometimes she still couldn't believe how much her life had changed. The woman who once spent every day trying to earn someone's love was now raising a child who would never have to question hers. Jasmine had met Marcus Reed at a charity event organized by the Daniel Johnson Foundation. Marcus was a high school counselor who had spent years helping teenagers from struggling families get into college. Their first conversation lasted nearly 2 hours. Their second lasted 4. Their friendship grew slowly into something Jasmine had once been afraid to trust. Love. Not the kind that demanded sacrifice as proof. Not the kind that disappeared when she said no. Marcus respected her boundaries. He celebrated her dreams. And when Jasmine finally told him everything about her childhood, he didn't try to fix her. He simply listened. 2 years later, they married in a small ceremony surrounded by close friends and family. On her wedding morning, Jasmine opened the final letter her father had written for her. For my daughter's wedding day. She had saved it all those years. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the paper. My beautiful Jasmine. If today is your wedding day, I wish more than anything that I could be there to walk beside you. Choose someone who respects your heart, not someone who asks you to break it to prove your love. Build a home where apologies are spoken, forgiveness is earned, laughter is common, and nobody has to wonder whether they belong. And when you look around today, don't focus on the person who isn't there. Look at everyone who stayed. I love you, Princess. Dad. Jasmine had pressed the letter against her heart and cried. Then she'd walked down the aisle carrying a small photograph of Daniel attached to her bouquet. Her father couldn't walk beside her. But his love did. The Daniel Johnson Foundation had also grown beyond anything Jasmine imagined. What started as one scholarship for Kayla became dozens. Then hundreds. The foundation partnered with schools across Chicago to help students who were working long hours, caring for sick relatives, facing housing instability, or considering dropping out because their families couldn't afford basic expenses. And Kayla? She graduated from college. At the foundation's annual dinner, she stood on stage in front of hundreds of guests. Jasmine sat in the audience beside Marcus. My name is Kayla Williams, she began. Years ago, I thought my future was over. I was 17, working after school and considering dropping out because my family needed money. Then a nurse sat beside me in a hospital hallway. Kayla looked directly at Jasmine. She didn't just give me a scholarship. She gave me permission to believe my life could become something more than survival. The room erupted in applause. Jasmine wiped away a tear. For the first time, she understood exactly what her father had meant. The greatest inheritance wasn't the $1.8 million. It was what she could turn it into. Opportunity. Hope. A second chance. And Linda? Their relationship didn't magically repair itself. There were no overnight miracles. Linda started therapy too. She found a new job. She stopped asking Jasmine for money. And most importantly, she stopped treating apologies as words and started treating them as actions. Some months were good. Others were difficult. But Linda kept showing up. Slowly, Jasmine allowed her back into her life. Not as the mother Jasmine had spent her childhood wishing she had. But as the imperfect woman who was finally willing to change. And when Olivia was born, Linda cried harder than anyone at the hospital. She held her granddaughter carefully and whispered. You're going to know every single day how loved you are. Jasmine heard her. She said nothing. But she smiled. Because maybe ending a cycle didn't always mean walking away forever. Sometimes. It meant refusing to continue it. On a warm Sunday afternoon, Jasmine drove Olivia to Oakwood Cemetery. Olivia skipped between the headstones, carrying a small bouquet of flowers. When they reached Daniel's grave, Jasmine knelt. Okay, sweetheart. Olivia carefully placed the flowers down. Is this Grandpa Daniel? Jasmine smiled. Yes. The grandpa who wrote you all those letters? That's him. Olivia studied the photograph Jasmine kept beside the grave. He looks like you. Jasmine laughed. People say I have his eyes. Olivia sat beside her mother. Do you miss him? Jasmine looked at the headstone. For years, that question would have broken her. Now, she understood grief differently. I miss what we could have had. She wrapped an arm around Olivia. But I'm grateful for what he gave me. Money? Jasmine laughed softly. No. Something much more important. Olivia frowned. What? Jasmine kissed her forehead. He taught me that I never have to beg someone to love me. That evening, the entire family gathered at Jasmine's house. Emily brought dessert. Margaret arrived carrying old photographs. Marcus stood outside grilling while Olivia ran through the backyard. And then Linda arrived. She carried a homemade pie. Grandma. Olivia raced toward her. Linda bent down and opened her arms. There's my favorite girl. Jasmine watched from the doorway. Years earlier, she would never have imagined this moment. Her mother. Her husband. Her daughter. Her friends. People laughing around a table instead of arguing about money. No guilt. No fear. No one keeping score. Just family. Not perfect. But healing. Later that evening, after everyone left and Olivia was asleep, Jasmine walked into her bedroom. On her nightstand sat the old photograph of Daniel holding her as a little girl. Beside it was the final image from her wedding. Jasmine, Marcus, and Linda standing together. 2 photographs. 2 different chapters of her life. She picked up her father's picture. You were right, Dad. She smiled. I finally learned how to live. The following morning, Jasmine's phone rang while she was preparing breakfast. She looked at the screen. Mom. For a moment, she remembered another phone call years earlier. The accidental call that had broken her heart. The conversation she was never supposed to hear. The night she thought she'd lost everything. Jasmine answered. Hey, Mom. Linda's voice came through warmly. Good morning, sweetheart. I wasn't calling for anything. I just wanted to hear your voice. Jasmine became still. Those words sounded familiar. They were the same reason Jasmine had called her mother all those years ago. This time, however, the response was different. Jasmine smiled. I'm glad you called. There was a short silence. Then Linda said. I love you, Jasmine. Jasmine closed her eyes. I love you too, Mom. And when the call ended, Jasmine stood beside the kitchen window watching the morning sun rise over Chicago. The woman who once believed she wasn't good enough had finally understood the truth. Her worth had never depended on how much money she gave. Her kindness wasn't weakness. Setting boundaries wasn't cruelty. And love was never supposed to be something she had to earn. Sometimes, the moment that breaks your heart is the same moment that opens your eyes. Jasmine thought that accidental phone call had destroyed her family. Instead, it forced her to stop living for everyone else. It led her to the truth about her father. It gave her the courage to build a new life. And eventually, it taught her mother how to love differently. Jasmine didn't get her childhood back. She couldn't recover the 22 years she spent believing her father abandoned her. And forgiveness couldn't erase what happened. But Jasmine had something more powerful than the past. She had a future. A future she finally understood belonged to her. And this time, she wasn't going to spend it proving she deserved to be loved. She was going to spend it loving, living, and making sure her daughter never had to ask the same question she once did. Am I enough? Because Jasmine already knew the answer. Yes. She always had been. Thanks for watching. See you on our next story.